Continuing with our politics lead, we are just 3 days away from the biggest event so far in the race for the White House. President Biden, former President Trump, they're going to take the stage for the first presidential debate in Atlanta. Let's bring in our panel of political voices to discuss. Mike, I want to start with you because this is a race that has felt static for a very long period of time, always within the margin of error. I think Democrats feel like Biden campaign may be starting to edge up a little bit right now, but it is still firmly within the margin of error. Who has more to lose on Thursday night?
Oof, what a good question. I wish if I knew the answer to that, Phil, we'd all be richer, right? I think, to be honest with you, assessing this and talking to reporters that are going to be in the situation room and covering all of this after the debate and stuff like that, I think President Biden has the most to lose. And the reason I say that is because we know what Donald Trump is going to be. There's a reason why we've put these rules in place. It's because of Donald Trump, because of what happened during the 2020 cycle, the muting of microphones and things like that. We know what he is. We don't know what President Biden's going to be. There's recent reporting earlier today here on CNN about preparing for different versions of Donald Trump and what he's going to talk about. We've seen some of his campaign rallies. So having said all of that, the person with the most to lose is President Biden because Donald Trump is always on the offensive. I work in sports, boxing. Styles make fights. Trump is a puncher. He's going to continue to punch. Whether or not we agree with why he's punching or what he's saying during that punch, we know that he's going to continue to punch. And President Biden right now, we need to figure out what he's going to answer with policy-wise. And is he going to get distracted by the muting of the microphone when his opponent is saying something in response?
Your take on that?
I disagree, but for different reasons. I disagree because if Trump loses the debate, then he will definitely lose this election. I think he's going to lose the election anyway.
You think it's all...
But if he loses the debate and then loses the election, he's going to prison. And so I've always thought that the only reason that Trump is running is to stay out of prison. And so this debate literally hangs, his whole future hangs on this debate. Donald Trump's whole future hangs on this debate. And you're right. I think that we all know the unhinged, crazy, delirious Donald Trump that might show up. But that might not be the Donald Trump that shows up. So President Biden, the way that they are prepping him is, and we've heard this before, they're prepping him for whatever shows up. But they also need to understand that it's President Biden that needs to be on offense. He can't just sit there and say, oh, well, let me see which Donald Trump shows up and then I'll react, because that puts Donald Trump in the driver's seat. I think President Biden will go in there. He is very clear on the kinds of messages that he wants to communicate, how big of a threat Donald Trump is, an existential threat to every single thing this country holds dear. And he's got all of the evidence to back that up. And I actually think what he says can needle Donald Trump into acting in terms of the unhinged way that he does, that will lose exactly the kinds of voters that he will need in order to win.
Well, I certainly think that's probably part of the prep at Camp David, is trying to figure out what that would be. I'm interested, we have seen kind of a tonal shift from Trump advisors and surrogates over the course of the last couple of days, that Joe Biden could definitely debate. The bar was too low. He's been through a lot of these. He knows how to do it. Former President Trump, I think, put on Truth Social shortly after the debate was agreed to, crooked Joe Biden is the worst debater I've ever faced. He can't put two sentences together. That's kind of a head-snapping pendulum back and forth here. Which is it?
Listen, I didn't think they expected the success they expected by lowering the bar so easily for Joe Biden, and everybody assumed that him walking to the stage would be success, and there's sort of recognition that that was a mistake. And now they're going to have the policy discussion. And you're right. I mean, I think the challenge, in my view, is going to be the challenges on Joe Biden. Like, he has to reconstruct his COVID coalition that doesn't care about COVID today, but they now care about inflation. And for the last 36 months, Joe has had a target to hit inflation at 2%, and he has failed to hit that target. So in sports analogy, we're talking, that's a goose egg. So he's been a goose egg for 36 months in hitting the #1 target that voters care about. I welcome a debate about the economy. I welcome a debate about immigration. These are areas that the Joe Biden coalition has sort of moved away from him because he's failed to achieve those goals, or his goals have been too liberal. Remember, he ran as a moderate, and now he's running as a full-fledged liberal-based progressive, and that's just out of tune with the American
Yeah, I was going to say, I think some liberal-based progressives would take issue with your framing of that.
Right.
But I do have the question, though. It is a pretty dramatic shift. You can't lay the groundwork for this guy can't put two sentences together for the better part of a year.
Did.
So
Exactly.
you think
I mean, we just did.
Did,
I mean,
right.
we did.
Right.
I mean, we
You're
had the
acknowledging
conversation.
it's a mistake.
Yeah, listen, I'm acknowledging that nobody recognized how easy it was going to be to show the bar so low for Joe Biden. Everybody believes he's getting lost on stage. He can't find the door. He misspeaks. He can't get up the elevator. So sort of highlighting that, is a cognitive issue for the course of the campaign, but it's not necessarily a cognitive issue for the debate. I mean, Joe Biden can put together 3 sentences. We saw the State of the Union, but I don't think that's going to be the determinative figure if Joe wins this debate. If he wins the debate, it's going to be on moments like this. And how does Joe Biden respond to Trump challenging him on inflation, challenging potentially on his son, challenging on immigration? All 3 of those things have been a failure for 3.5 years, and Joe Biden still doesn't have an answer, and he'll pivot to something else, I suspect.
He's got great answers. He's got great answers on the economy. Inflation is going down. People are feeling better. Economists have said that if the Donald Trump policies are actually enacted, inflation will shoot up. Families will have a lot more costs to deal with. So Joe Biden is happy to talk about the economy. He's also happy to talk about immigration, because what the last couple of months have shown is that Donald Trump and Republicans have zero interest in solving the issue of immigration. They only want to weaponize it, especially when they turn their back on the Senate bill that their own conservative senators had negotiated. And so therefore, President Biden has shown that he knows, and Democrats have known for quite some time, how to fix immigration. And that is the common sense, balanced approach of strong border security in addition to expanded legal pathways, which is what the majority of Americans want.
The challenge you have is that Joe Biden actually started this fire on the border. He reversed the policy.
That's not true
either. I let you speak, so please let me finish. So he reversed those 94 executive order policies that resulted in the flood coming in. He reversed the public charge. He's now giving benefits to illegal. Those are things that are drawing people toward the border. Joe Biden broke it. So in my view, an arsonist who starts the fire can't put it out. I just don't trust Joe Biden to put it out.
Are we going to have nuanced conversations like this on Thursday? Are we really going to talk about the actual crisis at the border, which is that the system is flooded and the system needs revamping?
That's exactly
I don't think we're going to have that on Thursday. I hope that that's the takeaway, Phil, but I don't think we're going to have it, given these 2 men and what we saw in 2020.
We'll see. I know the moderators are going to try.
Right.
We're all hoping for it because people deserve it at this point. There's no question about it. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Phil.
Coming up.